What is up, nerds? Paul Conti back again with another Stormcast Eternals video. I'm starting off a new series, and we'll see how far this actually ends up getting. But I want to go through one by one through all of the different battalions that the Stormcast have available to them. Which currently I believe is over 20 different battalions. So I've got if I do this once a week, that's like 6 months worth of content. So let's get on with it. First one we're going to look at is probably the most talked about at the moment, the Vanguard Wing Battalion. This one just recently took down a GT in the UK, and we'll talk about that specific list a bit later on. But I wanted to go over the general idea of what this battalion is, how people are using it, why it's good, and possibly some weaknesses to this sort of strategy. Spoiler alert, there's actually not a lot of weaknesses to this strategy, and I actually really suspect that we're going to be getting an FAQ that nerfs this at some point, because this is really, really, really good. This is it's definitely one of the best battalions that the Stormcast have. It may be the best battalion that the Stormcast have, and it may actually be one of the best battalions in all of Age of Sigmar because of the insane things that it lets you do. So, let's start off with the basics. What does it require? 3 units of prosecutors, 1 unit of liberators, 1 unit of judicators. And it is a 200-point battalion, so your minimum points investment is 760 points to get off the ground. What does this thing do? So your liberators and your judicators, while they're within 8 inches of a prosecutor from the battalion, on hit rolls of 6 or more, generate 2 wound rolls instead of 1. So on a 6 up, you get 2 wounds when you roll a 6 to hit. Then the second one is perhaps the most important one to really be taking note of. In each movement phase, instead of moving like they ordinarily would, the unit of liberators in the battalion can be removed from the board and set up anywhere within 5 inches of one of the units of prosecutors from the battalion. So basically it's a teleport move, right? You're just moving from anywhere to anywhere, and it's only dictated by being within 5 inches of one of the 3 units of prosecutors, and prosecutors move 12 inches on their own. So that's a tremendous amount of mobility. You can basically get them to almost anywhere on the board that you want at any time, every turn. And this is not a once per game ability. This is every turn your liberators get to teleport. Very, very powerful. So what are the loopholes in this? Which, that's the thing that actually makes this good, is that this is a battalion absolutely riddled with ridiculous loopholes that are completely abusable. So number 1, on the double wound effect, it is on 6 or more. Therefore, any buffs to hit decrease that number that generates double wounds. So if you have a unit of liberators that is getting +1 to hit from something, on a roll of a 5 or a 6, those liberators are going to be doing 2 wound rolls. So 1/3 of your liberators' attacks are going to generate 2 wound rolls. Now, you can do this a variety of different ways, and I'll be talking about that further on down the line. But really, anything that is going to either give you +1 to hit or let you re-roll hits is going to dramatically increase the number of extra wound rolls that you get to make with your liberators and your judicators. So the second 2 points are on the teleportation mechanic. This is a very specific rules lawyery, gamey sort of reading of the rules. This has been confirmed by the commentators on Warhammer TV that this is how this works. They did this on the Warhammer TV live stream that is done every Wednesday. So this is basically confirmation that says, hey, at GW, we say this is okay. So the unit of Liberators that's making that teleport move, that rule does not say it must be wholly within 5 inches of a unit of Prosecutors. Only that it must be within 5 inches of a unit of Prosecutors, which means you can take your Liberators, put one 4.5 inches away from one of your Prosecutors, and daisy chain the rest of the unit of Liberators basically anywhere you want to. That is sort of the crux of how this particular battalion is extremely abusable. The second part of this that makes it so easy to abuse is that there is no restriction on where those Liberators go in relation to enemy models. Typically, most of these sorts of moves, or special moves, special abilities, are going to require you to be at least 9 inches away from the enemy, or at very least more than 3 inches away from the enemy. This particular ability allows you to teleport your Liberators directly into close combat without making a charge move. That is incredibly powerful. And again, I'll talk about that a little bit later as we go on, why that's so powerful and why that is ridiculous. But needless to say, you can take your Prosecutors, move them out, daisy chain a unit of Liberators into a nice long conga line, and get a whole bunch of them directly into close combat with your opponent, top of turn 1, without making a charge move. So a whole variety of things that would trigger as a result of a charge move on your opponent's side of the battlefield in a defensive sort of way, those things don't trigger because you didn't actually charge. I could go on and on with this, but we're going to explore these ideas a little bit further, why it's important. But just to reiterate, the two big loopholes with this: buffing to hit increases the number of attacks that produce double wounds. And number 2, the teleportation allows you to daisy chain away from your Prosecutors and lets you go wherever you want with those, with a sufficiently large unit. So, how do we work this with combos? Well, first of all, let's look at our buffing to hit. So we can take a Lord Celestant, which gives out a bubble of +1 to hit, and a Celestial Hurricanum, which also projects a bubble of +1 to hit. If you get your Liberators in the crosshairs of both of these, they're getting +2 to hit. So your Liberators are generating, first of all, they're hitting on 2s, and they are generating 2 wound rolls on 4-up. That's incredibly powerful. I don't think I really need to explain to you how ridiculous that is. Literally, you throw 2 attacks per Liberator. So a unit of 5 Liberators is putting out, let's ignore the prime for a second. They're putting out 10 attacks. Literally half of those are going to produce double wounds. So out of those 15 attacks, those 10 attacks, you're getting at least 10 wound rolls just out of the bonus wounds, basically. So then you also have your additional hits of 2s and 3s that hit normally, and only a 1 is a flub and nothing happens. So in the case of a unit of 5 Liberators with this double buff affecting them, out of their 10 attacks, probably 2 of them will roll 1s and miss, and then you have about 3 of them that are going to hit but not produce double wounds, and then you're going to have 5 that do produce double wounds. So in total, you're going to have 5 Liberators, which ordinarily would just throw 10 attacks. They're going to be rolling for let me math this for a second. 13 wound rolls out of 10 attacks. That's pretty extraordinary. So what other things do we buff up these guys with? The Lord Castellan, the Staunch Defender command trait, and Mystic Shield all give +1 to hit, which, stacking up on your Liberators, which reroll 1s to save and have a natural save of 4, can very easily get these guys onto a 2-up save that rerolls if it fails. Which means that you're saving somewhere in the neighborhood of like 90% of the time against ordinary wound rolls. And the Lord Castellan plus Staunch Defender is really easy to make happen with how this force actually plays out, and I'll get more into that a little bit in a second. Then we have the Blessed Weapons Prayer, which generates extra attacks on 6+. So we see the same synergy here with the Lord Celestant and the Celestial Hurricanum, that not only are you generating double wound rolls on a roll of 6-up, you're also generating an extra attack on a 6-up when that hits, and it's also on a 6-up, it generates 2 wound rolls. So with the combination of the Lord Celestant and the Celestial Hurricanum and a successful Blessed Weapons Prayer, you have a unit of 5 Liberators. They throw 10 attacks. They're throwing 13 wound rolls just off those 10 attacks. 5 of those are also going to roll additional attacks, and out of those 5, you're likely only going to get 1 miss, and 2 to 3 are going to have double wound rolls, and then another one that hits. So you're producing like 5 or 6 more wound rolls on top of that. So you're taking that unit of 5 Liberators, suddenly they're throwing 19 or 20 wound rolls. That's pretty ridiculous. It's also stackable because the rule of 1 does not apply to blessed weapons. So you can, say, take several different Lord Relictors, give all of them the Blessed Weapons Prayer, and bless a unit's weapons 2 or 3 times, say. So for, let's say you do it twice and you get it off successfully, that means in combination with the Lord Celestant and a Celestial Hurricanum, for every hit roll of 4 or more, you are generating 2 extra attacks and generating 2 wound rolls. It is just multiplying out the power like to an unreasonable sort of degree. Now, also let's mention that this also impacts your Grand Hammers as well, when you can take 1 in 5 of your dudes having Grand Hammers. So it's got the same number of attacks and hit and wound and stats as an ordinary hammer, except it has rend 1 2 damage. So you see very quickly that those Grand Hammer attacks really start to stack up in really crazy sorts of ways with these different stacking effects. So one of the other things that we can throw in here as well is the Tempest Lord's Harbinger Chamber, which basically it's a mega battalion, quote unquote, a mega battalion. So it's a battalion of other battalions, but the only thing that is really required in it is 1 Vanguard wing battalion, and you must take 4 units of prosecutors instead of 3. And then There's a bunch of other battalions in the list that may take 0 to 3, and then also any other Stormcast Eternals units. So if you're going with a pure Stormcast army, it makes your list 1 drop. So you, at worst, against another opponent that also has a 1-drop list, it's a coin flip as to whether or not you're going first. In all other instances, if your opponent has more than 1 drop, you control the first turn. You get to go first. And this is a list that always wants to go first. And if it doesn't go first, it's going to play extremely cagey with its deployment and then get really aggressive and hope that they don't lose too much in that initial first turn. And our final one is Vandus Hammerhand, which is, he's really expensive, but really powerful. He gives each Liberator +1 attack. And I'm sure, as you can see, in combination with all of these other things, if you're using Blessed Weapons and a Lord Celestin and a Celestial Hurricanum. By the way, one thing that you can theoretically do is have the Lord Celestin as your general, give him the Consummate Commander command trait, which allows you to trigger another unit with a command ability, so you get to use 2 command abilities a turn. You target Vandus Hammerhand, so everybody that is within range gets +1 to hit and +1 attack. Makes me just run out of breath. There is insane combos that you can do with this. All told, you can make ridiculous things happen in combination with all of these things. So what is the actual competitive list archetype? Here's the core of the list. You run your 3 units of prosecutors. Generally, people run them with javelins because you don't really want to get them into close combat. You want to be having them kind of hit and fade and do lots of shooting attacks and use your liberators to get in your opponent's face. You take your unit of 5 judicators. Everybody takes them with bows. Nobody uses the crossbows. I haven't ever heard anybody speak highly of the crossbows in any way, shape, or form. The bows with a 24-inch range are just ridiculous, so we'll just leave that there. And here is the kicker. You run the maximum unit size of Liberators. You run 30 Liberators, which is 520 points. You almost get that last 100 for free. And you run the maximum number of Grand Hammers, which is 6, and you make your prime, obviously, one of the Grand Hammers. So your base cost for this, including the battalion, is 1,180 points. It does not include any heroes, and you're short 1 battle line for a 2,000 point game. So you have to fill that in somehow. And we're going to talk about how you fill in the rest of that. There's several different variations, kind of as you have seen from what I've been talking about, on variations on the theme. You have this core, the basic concept of what you do with it, and people go in different directions with what aspect of this battalion they really want to take advantage of to the max. So one road to go down is the Tempest Lord's Harbinger Chamber. It decreases your options significantly. The battalion itself costs 240 points, and then you have to take an extra unit of prosecutors, which is another 100 points. So you're basically spending 340 points primarily for the ability to just dictate who goes first the majority of the time. There are a couple of abilities that the Harbinger Chamber does have. It has a nice ability that basically lets your prosecutors all have an off-phase move, so you can roll a charge for them, and then it does not have to end within 1.5 inches of an enemy like an ordinary charge move would. So basically, since your prosecutors charge on 3d6, in the charge phase, it just gives you a 3d6 move, which is a pretty cool ability. It lets you move up your prosecutors into a place to get their shots off with their javelins, and then in the subsequent charge phase, they can back up into safety. Or also, depending on what sort of list you're playing against, you might want to move them up, shoot, and then spread them out afterward to zone off the board to prevent any opposing deep strikes from happening. Because most of your opponents are going to be within that sort of like 9-inch restriction issue that the majority of fair deep strike abilities have. One of the other options is to go with abusing hit buffs. So running a Lord Celestant and a Celestial Hurricanum and 2 to 3 Lord Relictors. That is basically just doubling down on an offensive combo, abusing, adding to hit rolls. You can go with a very defensive build, using the Lord Castellan and a Staunch Defender, usually on the Lord Castellan as well, using him as your general. For some reason, I've seen a lot of people do that. I don't think it's really necessary to go quite that extreme, but it basically lets you give your Liberators +2 to save. If you throw in a Luminarch of Hysh, you can also give them a 6-up ward save off of the Luminarch. Plus, you can cast Mystic's Shield on them, which brings them to a 1-up save. Ones still always fail, but at that point, it's basically making them immune to Rend 1, which, if you're going for a highly defensive-oriented list, that's a pretty valuable thing to do a lot of the time. Rend is a very powerful ability in this game, and if you can set things up that negate the effect of Rend, you're definitely looking at something positive. One of the other options is the combo offense that I was talking about previously, using the Lord Celestant. All these things have names that are way too similar. Lord Celestant with Consummate Commander and Vandus Hammerhand, so all of your guys getting +1 to hit and +1 attack. Then use whatever points you have left over for Lord Relictors with Blessed Weapons, to once again abuse that ability of having extra buffs to hit and extra attacks to generate more hit rolls, more wound rolls and more attacks. It is really abusive. If you go down this path, because Vandus is so expensive, you can't really simultaneously take either the Harbinger Chamber or the Celestial Hurricanum, so you have to make a choice kind of between the three of those things, or a Luminarch of Hysh. So really, you have kind of 4 different directions you can go in. You can either 1-drop, you can have the +1 to hit of the Hurricanum, you can have the ward save of the Luminarch, or you can have the extra attack rolls off of Vandus. Definitely a big variety of abilities, and we'll see here that there are other possibilities, obviously, for this as well. And I think this is definitely just sort of the 101 version of how to run this particular battalion. This is the list that I'm looking at to be bringing to a tournament very soon. I'm going to be using the Harbinger Chamber to do the 1-drop, running the Vanguard Wing Battalion as well, the 4 units of Prosecutors with Javelins, a unit of 30 Liberators, 2 units of Judicators, so a 2nd unit of Judicators to fill out the battle line, a Lord Celestant with Staunch Defender, a Lord Castellan, a Lord Relictor, and a Grifthound to fill out that last little random 40 points extra that I had hanging out there. So basically, this particular list is kind of spreading out things and taking a little bit more of a balanced approach. I'm not really going hard on anything in particular with my buffs. I'm using a Celestant and a Castellan and a Relictor, that they're all sort of buffing in different directions a little bit. The Castellan, in combination with the Celestant having Staunch Defender, is going to put all of my Liberators on a 2-up rerollable save. The Celestant plus the Lord Relictor plus the Vanguard wing is going to have all of my Liberators in that unit on hit rolls of 5-up. If I get the prayer off, they're going to be generating an extra attack and generating 2 wound rolls. So mathematically, every 5-up is going to be generating an extra 1.5 wounds on average. And the Griffhound, he's really just in there to fill things out. And if you happen to also run up against an opponent that's running a filthy list like this, the Griffhound suddenly lets all of your guys shoot the living shit out of your opponent when they daisy chain into your troops. So basic idea of how this works, I'm going to use the Harbinger Chamber to deploy all of my guys in one drop. I will very likely get the first turn. I'll move my Prosecutors up. I will shoot with my Judicators and my Prosecutors to take out as many of the softer targets as I possibly can with those, or potentially things that are going to be having like a static buff effect on my opponent's troops. I will then also teleport in all of my Liberators. The Grand Hammers will go on the harder targets, and the rest of the Liberators will sort of spread out. Depending on what my opponent's doing, I may want to use this in that sort of like T formation where you have a snake tail coming back to catch all of the buffs, and you go wide across your opponent's frontage, because all of my guys are going to be on a 2-up rerollable save if I do this. So it's going to create an impenetrable wall, basically, and stop my opponent from advancing onto the battlefield and taking objectives. And I'm going to be doing a lot of offensive power back to them. If I spread out, it's going to be a smattering of attacks hitting them all over the place. If, depending on what my opponent's doing, I can cluster up the Liberators a little bit more and put a lot of attacks on certain key targets. Like, for example, if Archeon decides to show up, or Nagash decides to show up, you'd probably want to try and take him down top of turn 1. So all of that sort of working in concert. And then in subsequent turns, you would continue to use your Prosecutors to take objectives and be the teleport points for your Liberators, so you can keep moving them around the battlefield wherever they need to be on any given turn. You're running 4 units of Prosecutors, so it's going to be really hard for your opponent to turn off the teleport ability, especially since they're not going first. So one of the prime targets is going to be your opponent's shooting that can shoot back at your shooting guys. Out of the whole list, the Prosecutors are probably some of the more fragile units, so you have to be a little bit more protective of them so that they don't just get blown off the board by your opponent's shooting. But that's the basic idea of the list that I'm going to be running. I will certainly be reporting back on how this ends up working out. I don't really know how hard-edged of a tournament this is going to be. It's just at friendly local game store, single-day tournament, 3 rounds. Not really any big GT or anything like that. So should have a relatively small turnout. But it's actually looking to be a decent turnout for the type of tournament. Probably going to have 10 or 12 people there or so is my guess. So this is the hit buff list. As you can see, we're running the Vanguard wing, 3 units of Prosecutors with Javelins, our Liberators, 2 units of Judicators. That's pretty much the core that you're going to use all the time. Lord Celestant with Staunch Defender, then 2 Lord Relictors and a Celestial Hurricanum. So we're getting off +2 to hit on everybody, potentially getting 2 blessed weapons onto your Liberators. They're also getting +1 to hit off +1 to save off of Staunch Defender. That is a lot of stuff. And if you position your Celestial Hurricanum correctly, you're also giving +1 to hit to all of your Judicators, so they'll be hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s. And the unit of Judicators that is in the Vanguard Wing Battalion has that same effect of rolling double wound rolls on a 6-up with their shooting attacks. It's not limited just to the melee attacks, but it is limited to just the Judicators and Liberators. It does not impact the Prosecutors. The Prosecutors are the guys that let you move around and get you all the buffs, and the Judicators and Liberators are the guys that are doing all of the heavy lifting. So I think this one is fairly self-explanatory. You move your guys forward, you daisy chain back to get in the buff range of the Celestant and the Hurricanum. You try and get blessed weapons off twice on your Liberators, and you teleport your Liberators across the board and get as many of your guys into combat as you possibly can, and basically try and table your opponent on turn 1. That's basically what's going on. And by the way, this Celestial Hurricanum still has its shooting attack, and you can still Mystic Shield your Liberators, so they're still potentially on a 2-up rerollable save, and the Hurricanum gives you some nice access to mortal wounds. That's going to average 5 mortal wounds a turn at an 18-inch range. You're probably going to be moving it up its full 10 inches, so you have a 28-inch effective range on the Celestial Hurricanum, so you can basically hit anything on your opponent's side of the board that you really want to. The defensive list. This one is actually not even really a complete list. I've got 220 extra points that I really didn't know what to do with when I was kind of putting this together. So we've got the usual core of the Vanguard Wing Battalion. We've got the Celestant, once again with Staunch Defender, Lord Castellan, and the Luminarch of Hysh. You're going to be using the Luminarch to add a Mystic Shield onto your Liberators whenever you can to put them on a 1-up save, so they ignore Rend. And they are, otherwise 2-up rerolling plus a 6-up ward save. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. There's a variety of other things. You could throw a Battle Mage in here that has Life Surge that will heal your guys and give them a second 6-up ward save. So that's definitely a possibility. There's a plethora of other things that you can do with that last 220 points. But basically the idea here is that instead of going in and alpha striking your opponent, you're going to really be alpha blocking your opponent. You want to get them into a position where you're zoning off the board, preventing your opponent from getting access to the majority of the board, and flying around with your Prosecutors and holding objectives as much as possible. And shooting things with the Luminarch and shooting things with your Prosecutors and your Judicators. Most of your offensive capability here is really going to be coming out of your shooting, not out of your Liberators. But the Liberators are still going to do some work anyway, because you still have a Lord Celestant in your list. That's giving them +1 to hit. So they're going to be doing double wounds on 5-up. The key to all of these, by the way, is basically you cluster all of your guys together that are giving the buffs to your Liberators. You move all of them up as far as you can. You move a unit of Prosecutors up right next to those guys, and you drop in your Liberators with the tail of the Liberators coming back within range of all of the things giving them area buffs, and then daisy chaining out to wherever you happen to want them to be. In the case of this particular list, you're probably not going to be teleporting them directly into combat. You'll probably be teleporting them out to 3 inches and a millimeter away from your opponent's troops so that they're not in close combat and your opponent is denied as much of the board as possible. So, combo offensive list, using Vandus and the Lord Celestant with Consummate Commander. Also in this list, I'm just running 3 Lord Relictors because why the hell not? And rounding it out with a Gryph-hound. Same basic core of the list. The idea here is instead of just getting extra +1s to hit, we're getting extra attacks off of Vandus. Then we're getting +1 to hit off of the Lord Celestant. The Lord Relictors are giving our guys all blessed weapons. Hopefully out of 3 attempts at blessed weapons, you'll get off like 2 of them. So you're going to be rolling 3 attacks per Liberator on 5 up. They're going to be generating 2 extra attacks if you get 2 of the Lord Relictors off. So that's going to be averaging total 5 attacks per Liberator, and they're going to be hitting on 2s and generating extra hits on 5s. And they're generating extra wounds on 5s. So they're throwing an average of 5 attacks each, which means they're going to be averaging throwing, like 3 or 4 wound rolls each, at least. So it's a lot. I'm just doing this math in my head. I probably should have done this ahead of time, but there is a tremendous amount of power that you can project using this combination of abilities. And the big thing that you really want to do is you're trying to wipe as much of your opponent off the board on top of 1 as possible between all of your shooting and what you can do with your Liberators. Pretty obvious here. All right, so this is the list that recently won a GT in the UK. So this is definitely a bit different than what I had been looking at previously. So they use the same core that I was using in my own lists. They're using a Lord Castellant with Staunch Defender as the general. So you're getting +2 to save on all of your Liberators. They're not getting any additional offensive buffs. What are they doing with all of those extra points? All dropped into a Lord Celestant on a Stardrake. So that Stardrake also flying around on a natural 3-up save, plus it's 16 wounds. It does a lot of damage. It's big and stompy. Obviously was powerful enough to win a GT. I am not surprised. I think just the sheer core of this list, without doing any other crazy shenanigans, is extraordinarily powerful. And then the Stardrake is, I mean, it's probably worth the 560 points. Let's put it that way. So that's sort of the basics here, guys. This is, well, I say the basics, but this is a fairly nuanced sort of combination of different things that you can do with the Vanguard Wing Battalion. I suspect our ability to daisy chain directly into close combat with your opponent is in some way going to get nerfed at some point. Even with that, this is still a really good battalion. You know, even if we're forced to, say, not be able to teleport to closer than 9 inches away from the enemy, then, you know, we probably go to the Alpha Block style list where we're being very defensively oriented with our Liberators, and we try and shoot our opponent to death while we hold the majority of the board and hold objectives that way. If we continue to be on the path that we're currently on with the current rulings, I think the more offensive lists are probably going to be more of the way to go, because when you stack multiple different kinds of buffs onto your Liberators, they get obscenely strong. And there's also some other battalions that are also really strong contenders that can do some similar things to this. That's going to be coming up in the future. So, wow, I'm almost at 40 minutes here talking about one battalion. We've got 20-something battalions to go. I'm going to try and do one of these a week, going through the various different battalions in the Stormcast arsenal. And at the rate that new ones are being released, I would say I will probably never be able to complete this series. So anyway, that's all for now. Hope you guys all go out and kick a lot of ass with the Vanguard wing. Don't kick too much ass, or GW is going to hit it with the FAQ hammer and nerf the whole thing down, which I think is going to probably happen anyway. I suspect this is not going to be an isolated incident that this wins a GT. I think this is going to be a fairly common occurrence once people figure out that this is like the thing to do with Stormcast Eternals, and people are going to use various different iterations and combos of this list to be successful. You know, these are just sort of my collection of ideas on what you can do with it. I've been collaborating with a few other people to come up with ideas of how to best extract the value out of this battalion. This is simply crazy. You can do lots of crazy stuff with this battalion. I think even if it gets nerfed, it's still going to be really powerful and still going to be a contender for the top tables. It's crazy. It's just crazy. I love it. You know, if I was across the table from it, I would absolutely hate it. But hey, you know, what do we like to do? We like to win games. That's what I'm here for, is to help you all learn how to win more games. And now win more games with Stormcast Eternals. And I'm going to continue all of my coverage of Stormcast. As I said, I'm going to try and do a battalion a week. And in addition to that, doing various coverage of other things on the docket. I have, you know, an evaluation of all of the different Paladin units, what each one is good for, which one might be best, and how to extract all of the best value from those. You know, looking at the various different armaments of different units. We can go look at all of our guys on Dracoths. That would be an excellent one to take a look at. We got 4 different kinds of ways we can arm our Dracoths riders. So that would be a really good option to take a look at. You know, overall, we've got a lot of different things that we can do with the Stormcast Eternals. There is an ever-expanding number of units and battalions and models in the line to choose from. They are the poster child of Age of Sigmar, and I think GW is just going to keep giving them love. I think, you know, we're going to continue to see every time we have a batch of new releases come out, there's going to be something thrown to Stormcast in there. You know, our most recent release with the Blightware box, we got a new hero out of that, plus it came just on the heels of a new chamber being opened. We have all of the Firestorm boxes that just came out. We have the new boxed game, which includes, you know, 3 at least new sculpts for models out of the Stormcast Eternals. We're not sure yet if they are going to get unique war scrolls or not, or if they're just going to be alternate sculpts for existing things, but time will tell what we get out of those. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up and stop babbling. I hope you guys have all learned something from this little ditty here. Vanguard wing, extremely strong. Give it a look, give it a try. You probably have the models to make it happen if you're a Stormcast Eternals player. Liberators are kind of the cornerstone of everything. Everybody's got prosecutors, everybody's got judicators. So it's pretty easy to make this thing happen. So good luck to all of you. Enjoy, and I will see you later.